I believe this verdict will cause cracks in the Egyptian state.
I expect he'd get the death penalty. He and his group deserve to die.
Egyptians await the final verdict of their former leader Mohamed Morsi. That decision is expected next week, but it's already been delayed once. Welcome back. We're talking about the future of the Muslim Brotherhood political party and the state of Egypt. To continue our conversation, Saha Khamis is in our studio. She's an expert on Arab and Muslim media and associate professor at the University of Maryland. From Cairo, Khaled Dawood is spokesman for Egypt's Al Dastur party. And from London, Omar Ashur is a senior lecturer in Middle East politics at the University of Exeter. Saha, when we look at developments in Egypt right now, the United States, one of the closest allies of Egypt and one of its main patrons, must be looking at this with a little more than just general interest. They must be concerned in some way at what is going on right there, going on right now. How will the United States respond to the fact that Mohamed Morsi's been sentenced to death?
Right, I think we have to go back a little bit, just rewind the tape a little bit and look at the situation back in 2011 when the popular uprising happened in Egypt, because the US found itself in a very odd position, really. On one hand, it's a Western democracy which has always spoken in favor of, protection of human rights and democratically elected presidents and so on. But on the other hand, it does have strategic interests in the region, which it always needs to safeguard and to protect. And unfortunately, that in many cases translated into backing authoritarian regimes, such as the Mubarak regime, which has stayed in power for 30 years and had a very heavy-handed authoritarian grip on power in Egypt. And they supported Mubarak for the reason of, quote-unquote, maintaining stability in Egypt, which is seen as also maintaining stability in the region. I'm afraid that with Sisi coming to power, in the way he did, with the military, backing and everything else, that was not in line with the democracy or the democratically elected means and measures. The U.S. found itself again in an odd position. Is it going to back stability again at the expense of democracy and human rights, or is it going to side with democracy and human rights? The very same question again poses itself with your own question about the sentencing of Morsi.
Right, but the bottom line for the United States is we look after our own interests first.
Protection of its own strategic interests in the region for sure, which again would put it in a very odd position, as I said. In my opinion, they're going to issue some kind of statement which says we hope that the course of law and legal justice will be taken into account in any kind of sentencing or any kind of legal decision. But I don't think they will go all the way to, for example, create any kind of diplomatic crisis with the current regime in Egypt because of strategic interests and because of the purpose of maintaining stability, which is seen as also protection of the U.S. strategic interests in the region.
Okay, Khaled, in addition to the political upheaval that we're seeing in Egypt, the country also has to deal with a whole host of problems. I mean, there are blackouts in the country, there are oil shortages, there are terrorist attacks. Add to that, we've now had a report from Human Rights Watch, which has accused President al-Sisi of major human rights violations. He says that, the report says that he has presided over what it calls a flagrant abuse of human rights and violence by some groups, and the government has increased. How is al-Sisi responding to this?
Well, of course, particularly the government was very critical of the Human Rights Watch report that came out recently. It accused it of being biased, not considering the real problem and real threats that Egypt is facing by some terrorist organizations that are very active in the country. And let me put it also within context. One of the reasons which the Egyptian government always uses for local consumption and for international consumption as well is look at the regional situation. Right now, we have a country like Libya, which borders Egypt, in a total state of chaos, total disintegration. The same applies to Syria, the same applies to Iraq, the same applies to Yemen. So Egypt is saying openly that we're living not just in a dangerous situation domestically, but also in a dangerous situation regionally. And countries like the United States, or countries even like in Europe, all the European Union nations, they obviously slowly and gradually recognized this reality that they need some sort of a partner in the Middle East region they can work with to contain other problems, like for the Europeans, the problem in Libya, the problem of illegal immigration, how not to turn a country like Libya, if you can imagine, turning Libya into another Afghanistan, whereby terrorists from all over the world gather there and start planning their attacks and actually carrying them out. So on one hand, the Egyptian government repeatedly, and Mr. Sisi repeatedly asks the international community and the local public opinion to consider this situation. But at the same time, my problem as a political party, as a secular political party that supported getting rid of the Muslim Brotherhood, is that depending on security measures alone, disrespect of human rights, committing violations does not present an attractive alternative to generations of young Egyptians who see no alternative but to fight against the government. So also, yes, while considering all the terrorism threat that we're facing, we also have to learn from previous lessons that violating human rights, putting people in prison according to arbitrary arrests, could actually make the situation worse and not help us improve our domestic situation.
Right, Omar, where is all this leading to? Do we have a situation in Egypt right now where it's either black or white? Can there be a political resolution, or is it a situation where political Islam, in the form of the Muslim Brotherhood, will not be allowed to and cannot exist with more secular politics in the country?
I wouldn't call it secular politics in any way. Religion is being used and abused by almost all sides, including the so-called, between quotations, secular parties, which are not exactly secular. But on that note, I think the main problem here is that the rise of factions within the military and the security establishment who are, you can call them eradicationists, who believe that the eradication of their political rivals, and their largest political rival at some point, and the most annoying for them was the brothers. So these factions have been dominating and have been steadily on the rise since July 2013. And there was attempts, international sponsored attempts for reconciliation. The most notable of them is the initiative by the US envoy William Burns and the EU envoy Bernardino Leon, which ended up, which more or less the leadership of the brothers and parts of the regime back then were okay with it. But these parts in the regime were like the nothing, the weaker factions that can be pushed aside without any consequences. And in the end, it ended up being the dominant side, which is the hawkish side, saying that it's not a reconciliation, it's an eradication. And this is what we ended up with at the moment.
Okay, Omar Ashur in London, Khaled Dawood from Cairo, and Dr. Sahar Khamis with me here in the studio. Thanks to all of you for joining us. That's all we have time for, but the conversation continues online. We want to hear your thoughts on this or any other show. So chat with us on Twitter at cctv_America, or join us on Facebook. Just search for CCTV America. I'm Anand Naidu in Washington, D.C. Thanks for watching.